In a quiet neighborhood, a young girl set out to ride her bicycle, the sun shining down on her innocent adventure. But when her mother returned to check on her just moments later, the yard was eerily empty. Before we get started, if you could ask the criminal in this case a question, what would it be? Write in the comments. Panic set in as the frantic mother dialed 911, her heart racing with dread. Days turned into months, and months into years, with no trace of the girl. For 2 agonizing years, the mystery of her disappearance loomed over the community like a dark cloud. Then, in a twist that would send shockwaves through the town, detectives stumbled upon the chilling truth behind her vanishing. Kayanne Poulton, born on September 20th, 1989, in Rochester, New York, was the only child in her family, and her story was about to take a harrowing turn that no one could have anticipated. In a seemingly idyllic setting, Kay was the center of her parents' universe, showered with love and attention. But as the clock struck 3, the fragile facade of their family life began to crack. Her parents made the fateful decision to part ways, leaving Kay in the care of her mother, Judy. Despite the divorce, her father remained a constant presence, visiting frequently, determined to maintain a bond with his little girl. Judy, however, found herself navigating the turbulent waters of single motherhood in a modest apartment complex nestled in a quiet suburban enclave of Rochester. The weight of financial strain pressed heavily on her shoulders, even as her ex-husband lent a helping hand. When Kay turned 4, Judy took on a part-time job, fueled by dreams of whisking her daughter away to the enchanting world of Disney. The journey ahead was fraught with challenges, but the promise of magic loomed on the horizon. On a warm summer evening, the air thick with anticipation, Judy prepared for her nightly ritual. It was May 23rd, 1994, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat at her kitchen table, methodically placing leaflets into the glossy pages of the magazines she would soon deliver. The clock ticked towards 6:45 p.m., marking the moment she would step into the shadows of her neighborhood, ready to embark on her routine. Little did she know, this evening would unfold in ways she could never have imagined. On a beautiful sunny evening, Kay's innocent request to go out for a walk seemed harmless enough. The allure of the warm sun and the laughter of other children playing in the yard was too enticing to resist. Judy glanced outside, noting the joyful chaos of kids at play, and with a mother's trust, she agreed to let her daughter venture out for a while. Little did they know, this seemingly ordinary moment would soon take a turn into the unexpected. Minutes passed as Judy instructed her daughter to stay within the confines of their yard. But Kay, with the innocent defiance of youth, darted out onto the street with her tricycle. Time was slipping away for Judy. She had only a few moments left to finish sorting the leaflets. Once that task was complete, she intended to deliver the magazines and treat Kay to McDonald's. With determination, she gathered the magazines and headed to the car, planning to call Kay back home. But as Judy stepped outside, a chilling realization struck her. Her daughter was nowhere to be found. Panic set in as she called out Kay's name, but silence answered her. Judy's heart raced as she scoured the yard, then ventured into the complex grounds, searching for any sign of her little girl. But Kay was nowhere to be found. The mother, Judy, strained to hear the familiar sounds of her daughter's tricycle, the creaking wheels that usually echoed down the street. Instead, an unsettling silence enveloped the neighborhood. With each passing second, Judy's panic escalated, her cries piercing the stillness and drawing the attention of concerned neighbors. Desperately, she inquired if anyone had seen her daughter. A few recalled glimpsing Kay playing in the yard with other children, but no one knew where she had vanished. As the grim reality of Kay's disappearance set in, the neighbors rallied together, joining the frantic search. But they were met with an eerie quiet that only deepened the dread in Judy's heart. In a quiet neighborhood, a mother named Judy found herself engulfed in a chilling uncertainty. Her daughter, Kay, had vanished along with her beloved bicycle, leaving behind only the dense trees that cloaked the complex and the imposing fence that separated their world from the bustling highway. Judy's heart raced as she recalled the rules she had instilled in Kay. The little girl had never strayed beyond the safety of their yard. The thought of her daughter disobeying was unfathomable. With a small bike that could only carry her so far, Judy felt a gnawing dread settle in her stomach. Time was slipping away, and the shadows of fear loomed larger. In a desperate bid for answers, she reached for the phone, dialing the police. Within moments, the sirens pierced the stillness, and officers arrived, ready to unravel the mystery that had unfolded in the depths of the trees. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the air thickened with tension. The search intensified, and soon, the wail of sirens echoed through the complex as firefighters and canine units arrived, their presence a stark reminder of the urgency of the situation. Officers moved methodically, canvassing each door, their instincts sharp, convinced that Kay was still hidden within the labyrinth of the complex. If this was indeed a case of abduction, the residents were the most likely suspects. After all, an outsider would have faced insurmountable odds to slip in, snatch Kay from the yard, and vanish without a trace. With 300 units in the complex, the residents opened their doors willingly, their desperation to assist palpable as they joined a frantic search for the girl who had vanished into thin air. In the stillness of the night, the complex manager, armed with spare keys, led the officers into the shadows of the apartments. Each door they opened held the promise of discovery. Yet, tragically, none revealed the whereabouts of Kay or her bicycle. As the hours dragged on, the search pressed into the early morning, the clock striking 4 a.m., but hope began to wane in the chilling darkness. The case took a dark turn as it was reclassified as a kidnapping. A special unit stepped in, and detectives pressed Judy for answers. They inquired about anyone in their lives who might harbor ill intentions. The name that surfaced was Cale's father, but Judy quickly dismissed the notion of his involvement, insisting he had no motive to abduct his own child. As the detectives delved deeper into the case, they turned to Judy, the concerned mother, for any insights about the residents of the complex. With a furrowed brow, she recounted a peculiar encounter with a newcomer, a 22-year-old man named Mark, who had recently settled in with his wife and their toddler son. There was something unsettling about Mark, something that set off alarm bells in Judy's mind. Their brief exchanges in the yard had left her feeling uneasy. Once, he had commented on her daughter's beauty, a remark that, while seemingly innocent, echoed in Judy's thoughts, mingling with the whispers of caution that had begun to swirl around her. It was a small detail, but in the world of shadows and secrets, even the smallest detail could hold the key to unraveling the truth. It was a chilling moment when Mark's tone shifted, leaving Kay feeling uneasy. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, revealing something that sent shivers down her spine. He confessed to watching all the little girls in the complex, singling out Kay as the prettiest of them all. Those words hung in the air, thick with suspicion, and Judy, Kay's mother, felt a wave of dread wash over her. From that day forward, she made every effort to steer clear of Mark, though fate had a way of intertwining their paths in the yard. Then came the day he posed a question that would haunt her thoughts. Would Kay tell her if someone tried to touch her? Judy's heart raced as she replied with a simple yes, before hastily retreating, her mind racing with concern and fear. Questions lingered in the air, thick with suspicion, as the conversations unfolded. Mark Kay, once a familiar figure on the playground, had become a source of unease for Judy. She had once allowed her daughter to play near him, but that was before. Now, she kept her daughter at a distance, even when she was present. As Judy recounted her memories to the detectives, a chilling detail surfaced. Just minutes after she had stepped outside to search for her daughter, she spotted Mark in the yard, emerging with his son, heading toward the playground. She approached him, inquiring if he had seen Kay. His response was a simple, unsettling no. Yet, there was something else that caught Judy's eye, something strange that she couldn't quite place at the time. Her mind was clouded with dread for her daughter, and in that moment of panic, she noticed something peculiar. The man's sneakers were devoid of shoelaces. The detectives, sensing the urgency of the situation, summoned Mark for questioning. He vehemently denied any connection to Cale's disappearance, even consenting to a polygraph test. The results came back clean, leaving them no choice but to release him. Ironically, Judy herself unwittingly provided him with an alibi, recalling that she had seen him at the playground with his son precisely when she was frantically searching for her child. In the chilling early hours of the investigation, the police turned their attention to Mark, scouring his apartment with a fine-tooth comb. Yet, the search yielded nothing. No sign of Cale's bicycle, no trace of the girl herself. As the hours ticked by, Mark was cleared of suspicion, leaving detectives grappling with a void of leads. With no other suspects in sight, their gaze shifted to Judy, probing for any hint of her involvement in her daughter's mysterious disappearance. Judy, fully aware of the protocol, complied with their inquiries, answering each question with a calm demeanor. But the longer the detectives lingered on her, the more unsettling the atmosphere became, as the weight of their scrutiny hung heavily in the air. Her anguish deepened as news of Cale's disappearance began to flood the local media, plastered across billboards and flyers that dotted the city. The police were inundated with calls, tips pouring in like a relentless tide, each one more desperate than the last. The count soared past 1,000, and investigators scrambled to follow every lead. Yet, one by one, they all crumbled into nothingness, leading to a chilling silence as the case grew cold for months on end. But Judy, a mother's heart unwavering, clung to hope, refusing to believe her daughter was lost forever. She abandoned her job, pouring every ounce of her being into the search, driven by a love that would not be extinguished. In a desperate bid to keep the case alive, she tirelessly printed and posted flyers, reaching out to various media outlets. Her efforts were bolstered by a group of compassionate individuals who not only helped distribute the flyers, but also managed to raise a staggering $100,000, offered as a reward for any leads on Cale's mysterious disappearance. Judy's determination didn't stop there. She sought national attention, even receiving an invitation to the Oprah Winfrey Show, where her daughter's plight was highlighted not once, but twice, in a heart-wrenching appeal for answers. On a widely watched television program focused on unsolved mysteries, Judy took it upon herself to partner with local businesses, ensuring that flyers detailing Cale's disappearance were a constant presence in their offices, establishments, and even on commercial vehicles. Her determination led her to convince 2 airlines to include these flyers in the envelopes accompanying ticket purchases. This relentless effort bore fruit as new leads began to surface, prompting the police to investigate each one with diligence. Yet, despite their tireless work, the case remained shrouded in darkness. For 2 long years, the search continued, until an unexpected twist would change everything. On that fateful day, August 9th, 1996, a woman reached out to the police, her voice trembling as she recounted a fierce argument with her husband. She was weary of his erratic behavior, and the weight of her decision to seek a divorce hung heavily in the air. In a desperate attempt to sway her, he poured out his heart, pleading for her understanding, revealing the turmoil that had consumed him. But then, in a chilling twist, he confessed to a dark secret: the murder of Kay Poulton. The revelation struck her like a thunderbolt, leaving her reeling in disbelief. Without a moment's hesitation, she gathered their child and fled to her father's house, seeking refuge from the horror that had just unfolded. In a moment of desperation, she dialed 911, her voice trembling as she finally disclosed her husband's name to the police. Mark Christie, the man who lived next door. The detectives listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief as they absorbed the weight of her revelation. Yet, lurking beneath the surface of this shocking confession lay a formidable obstacle. Under state law, the sanctity of marital communication was fiercely protected, rendering any information shared between spouses inadmissible in court. This meant that even if Mark was hiding something sinister, the police found themselves handcuffed, unable to arrest or interrogate him. Meanwhile, the investigation had already taken a turn, with Mark's apartment being scoured in the early hours, a scene fraught with tension and unanswered questions. In a quiet neighborhood where Cale once played, a chilling narrative began to unfold. Mark, a seemingly ordinary man, was seen in his yard with his child shortly after Cale's mysterious disappearance. The police, perhaps too eager to dismiss the unsettling coincidences, believed he lacked the opportunity to commit such a heinous act. Yet, Detective Crow, intrigued by the whispers surrounding Mark's wife's account, felt compelled to dig deeper. What he uncovered was unsettling. Mark and his family had abruptly vacated their home in Cale's complex just weeks following the incident, driven away by grave accusations. Parents of two young girls had reported a disturbing sight. Mark standing naked in his doorway, exposed and unashamed, in plain view. Strangely, no investigation ever followed this alarming report, leaving a dark cloud of suspicion hanging over the neighborhood, and the truth about Cale's fate remained shrouded in mystery. It was a curious situation, one that raised more questions than answers. Technically, he was in the sanctity of his own home, yet the circumstances surrounding it felt deeply unsettling to Detective Crow. Mark had relocated to a city 50 miles away from Rochester, and Crow made his way there, anticipating a confrontation. But instead of the man he sought, it was Mark's mother who greeted him at the door. Her words were a chilling revelation. Her son would not speak to the police without legal representation, a lawyer already summoned. It became clear that Mark was aware of his wife's call to the authorities, leaving Detective Crow with a sinking realization. His options were dwindling, and the truth remained just out of reach. In a twist of fate, Mark found himself in a precarious situation. A confession to his spouse, a secret that could have unraveled everything, was deemed inadmissible in court. His lawyer, a shrewd protector, had successfully barred the police from interrogating him, allowing Mark to roam free, unburdened by the looming specter of prosecution. But Detective Crow, relentless in his pursuit of the truth, was far from ready to throw in the towel. During a tense conversation with Mark's mother, the very man at the center of the storm emerged. With a calm demeanor, Crow managed to persuade Mark that he merely sought to discuss a few details about Kay's case. The detective proposed they drive to a nearby restaurant, where over steaming cups of coffee, the shadows of the past might just reveal their secrets. To his surprise, Mark agreed, but only if the detective would take him to his lawyer afterward. They made a stop at a nearby Italian restaurant, where the detective maintained a casual conversation with Mark, carefully avoiding any pressure. This approach proved effective. As they waited for their order, Mark unexpectedly opened up. He voiced his deep regret for what he had done to Kay, revealing that his actions had haunted him for the past 2 years. He confessed that he was constantly reminded of Kay, seeing her in the news and on. Flyers plastered with her face haunted him at every turn. Crow moved with caution, careful not to spook Mark with too much pressure. Their history stretched back to the early days of the investigation, but this was far from their first conversation. Crow sensed Mark's pride, a twisted satisfaction in having outsmarted the police and evaded justice. So, the detective chose to exploit that ego, telling Mark he had indeed managed to deceive the entire team of investigators. It was a tactic that proved effective, drawing Mark deeper into the web of his own making. Replied that he didn't want to sound like he was proud of himself, But the way he got rid of the bicycle was truly ingenious. Mark asked the detective if he wanted to know the details. However, he warned him he would only talk about the bicycle and nothing more. Crow continued to maintain a soft, even friendly tone to avoid scaring Mark and to gather as much information as possible, reassuring him that he didn't have to talk about anything he didn't want to. Then Mark stated that Cale's tricycle had been in for 3 long days. He remained in his apartment, a silent witness to the chaos that unfolded outside since her disappearance. He understood the urgency of the situation. The police would undoubtedly scour every inch of every apartment, driven by the instinct to find a child in peril. Yet, there was a peculiar loophole in the law that allowed them to search for a missing child, but not for evidence. This meant they could only inspect places where a child could potentially hide. In a moment of desperate clarity, Mark made a chilling decision. He began to dismantle the bike, methodically cutting it into pieces and concealing them in various corners of the apartment, areas far too small for a child to ever fit. He wrapped some of the parts in clothes, a deceptive layer meant to shield his dark secret from prying eyes. He tucked them away in closets, while others were carefully stashed in small bags, which he then carried to his car. One by one, he methodically disposed of them, taking the pieces far from the safety of home. Police officers were stationed at the complex's exit, inspecting each vehicle, but their focus was solely on the missing girl. The small bags, inconspicuous and unassuming, slipped past their scrutiny. As he listened, Detective Crow felt a surge of determination. He sensed he was on the brink of extracting a full confession from Mark. He leaned in, suggesting that perhaps Kay's death wasn't entirely his fault, a subtle manipulation that could unravel the truth. In a chilling twist of fate, a tragic accident unfolded, leaving Mark grappling with the weight of his impending future. When he inquired about the potential sentence he might face, Crow ominously suggested it could hover around 25 years. Mark, desperate and disheartened, argued that it would be unjust to confine him for half his life, tearing him away from his beloved wife and son. He lamented the torment of the past 2 years, claiming that his personal hell should carry some weight in the eyes of the law. Yet, despite the haunting nature of his plea, Crow remained steadfast, pressing Mark to consider easing his own suffering by revealing the truth of what transpired that fateful day. It was a moment steeped in tension. Mark, with a heavy heart, declared his readiness to confess, but only after consulting with a lawyer. The detective, seasoned in the ways of the law, recognized the futility of such a request. No lawyer worth their salt would permit a client to admit to a crime without the shadow of evidence looming over them. With a calculated honesty, the detective laid bare the grim reality. If Mark remained silent, Cale's parents would forever be left in the dark, haunted by the unknown, never to learn the fate of their daughter or the torment she may have endured before her untimely end. It was then that Mark's voice broke the silence, uttering a chilling assurance. She didn't suffer. In that moment, the detective felt the weight of impending confession hanging in the air, palpable and foreboding. It was a moment heavy with the weight of confession. As Mark sat across from the detective, the air thick with unspoken truths, he finally broke the silence, declaring it was time to do right by himself, his family, and God. His admission hung in the room like a dark cloud as he recounted the chilling details of that fateful night. He insisted, almost desperately, that the girl hadn't suffered, revealing the grim act of strangulation that he had committed. But he was quick to clarify, as if to shield himself from further darkness, that he hadn't done anything else to her. According to Mark, Kay had come to his apartment that evening, her innocent request to play with his young son leading her into a trap he had set. He let her in, taking her bike to the kitchen, fully aware that her mother would never have allowed such a visit. In the dim light of the apartment, Mark made a fateful decision to keep a low profile. He ascended the creaking stairs to the children's room, where Kay was innocently playing. But as the minutes ticked by, a chilling sound pierced the air, Judy's frantic voice calling for her daughter from the yard. Panic gripped Mark. The weight of his actions bore down on him. He knew the wrath of a mother scorned would be unbearable. In a moment of desperation, he returned to the children's room, where the unthinkable happened. He took Kay's life with his bare hands. Detective Crow, upon hearing the details, couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that the story held darker secrets yet to be uncovered. In the chilling narrative of this case, the evidence pointed to a sinister plan. Mark, with a deceptive charm, likely lured Kay into his apartment, cloaked in the innocent guise of wanting to play with his son. With his wife away at work, the stage was set for a dark encounter. It was here, in the shadows of his home, that he may have attempted to violate her trust. But when the sound of Judy calling out Kay's name pierced the air, panic likely gripped him. The fear of exposure could have driven him to desperate measures. The detective's mind raced back to the detail that Judy had seen Mark outside, his sneakers devoid of laces, a chilling suggestion that those very laces had been repurposed for a far more sinister act. This revelation hinted that the crime was not a mere act of impulse, but rather a calculated move in a twisted game of control. As the tension hung thick in the air, Mark found himself with a moment of reflection, the laces of his shoes slipping through his fingers. He attempted to downplay the gravity of his actions, weaving a narrative that twisted the truth. But Crow, ever the astute investigator, sensed the cracks in Mark's facade. He knew that voicing his suspicions could send Mark into a spiral of denial, sealing off the vital details about the body. So, he leaned in, a silent observer, urging Mark to continue. In a chilling recount, Mark described how, after the act, he dragged Kayle's lifeless form to the kitchen, leaving her sprawled on the cold floor, a haunting image that would linger long after the words were spoken. Before finding out all the details, do you think this crime was solved or not? Write your bet in the comments. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the neighborhood, a sinister plot was unfolding. Mark, desperate to weave a web of deceit, stepped outside, intent on crafting an alibi that would shield him from suspicion. The air was thick with tension as he heard Judy's frantic calls for her daughter echoing through the yard. With calculated precision, he positioned himself in her line of sight, ensuring she would see him, a mere passerby in the chaos. But the facade was fragile. Moments later, after Judy's gaze had shifted, Mark slipped away, returning to the dark corners of his home. There, in the stillness, lay Kay's lifeless body, a tragic secret hidden beneath a pile of laundry. With a heart pounding like a drum, he placed her in a basket, covering her with clothes as if to shield her from the world outside. The clock was ticking. Minutes later, he emerged again, the basket now a heavy burden in his hands, and placed it in the trunk of his car. Outside, the scene was chaotic. Neighbors had gathered, their voices a chorus of concern as they joined Judy in the desperate search for her missing daughter. Unbeknownst to them, Mark was just another face in the crowd, a wolf in sheep's clothing, blending seamlessly into the unfolding tragedy. In a scene that unfolded like a dark shadow creeping through the night, chaos reigned, and amidst it all, Mark moved with a chilling calmness. He had his son by his side, a silent witness to the unfolding horror, as they drove to the company where he donned the guise of a security guard. The massive building loomed ahead, a fortress of secrets. He parked discreetly at the rear, leaving behind a basket that concealed Kay's lifeless body, a grotesque offering left by the door. With a heart that beat steadily, Mark circled the building, entering through the main entrance as if nothing were amiss. It was his day off, a perfect cover, and he spun a tale of forgetfulness to his unsuspecting coworkers, a story that raised no alarms. As he traversed the sterile halls, he moved with purpose, finally reaching the back door. With a swift motion, he retrieved the basket, the weight of his actions heavy in the air. Yet he remained unfazed, a predator in the shadows, ready to continue his grim task. He ascended the towering 30,000-gallon tank, its surface glistening ominously under the dim light. With a calculated motion, he lifted the lid and let Kay slip inside, her fate sealed as he secured a heavy metal object to her. The chilling act continued as he discarded her clothes, but curiously, he left her earrings untouched, a haunting detail. Once he had disposed of the evidence, he returned home, seamlessly blending into the frantic search for Kay alongside the unsuspecting neighbors. In a twisted stroke of luck, he had managed to conceal the body from prying eyes, eluding the police and leaving no trace of his dark deed. In a chilling twist of fate, the confession spilled from his lips like a dark secret. He admitted, with a heavy heart, that taking Kay's life was a grave mistake, a choice he now regretted. With the weight of his actions pressing down on him, Crow, the detective, had gathered all the necessary details and in a seemingly mundane act, paid for their meal, leaving a mere $2 tip. Yet, the gravity of the situation loomed large as Mark, resigned to his fate, accompanied the detective to the station, where the stark reality of murder charges awaited him. As the news of his confession reached his lawyer, frantic attempts were made to retract it, but the damage was done. Mark had willingly provided every detail, and Crow had played by the rules. Meanwhile, the police wasted no time, racing to Mark's workplace, ready to uncover the truth hidden within the shadows of his life. 2 years had passed, yet the victim's body remained entombed within the confines of that cold, unforgiving tank. The ravages of time had obscured the truth, leaving experts unable to ascertain the cause of death or any other vital details. All they could do was confirm her identity, granting Judy the bittersweet closure of finally laying her daughter to rest. Meanwhile, Mark, burdened by his own conscience, confessed his guilt before the judge, receiving a sentence of no less than 25 years behind bars. Just as Detective Crow had foreseen, the man's lawyer skillfully negotiated a deal, managing to have the kidnapping charges dismissed, leaving only the weight of murder upon his shoulders. But this was not the end of Mark's tale. It was merely the beginning of a darker chapter. In the year 2010, the police decided to dust off an old case that had haunted them since 1988. It was the tragic murder of a 74-year-old woman named Viola Manville, who had been taking a peaceful walk in a quiet suburb of Rochester when her life was violently cut short. Detectives found themselves sifting through a list of suspects, one of whom was a mere 16 years old at the time, a boy named Mark. Despite the weight of suspicion, Mark passed a polygraph test during his interrogation, revealing no signs of deception. The investigation took a turn when a man named Frank Sterling was ultimately arrested for the crime. Initially, he staunchly denied his involvement, but after a grueling overnight interrogation, the pressure became too much, and he confessed to the murder. However, even from behind bars, Frank sought to challenge his conviction, determined to overturn the fate that had befallen him. In a chilling twist of fate, the narrative unfolds with a haunting claim. The police had coerced Frank's confession, leaving him in a fog of confusion by the end of the interrogation. Despite his desperate attempts to assert his innocence, the walls of justice seemed impenetrable. It wasn't until 2010 that the case was reopened, and the remnants of evidence were sent to the lab for a fresh examination. The experts unearthed a DNA sample from the true perpetrator, a match that sent shockwaves through the system. This sample did not belong to Frank, but to another inmate lurking in the shadows of the FBI database, Mark Christie. Then, in 2011, at the age of 39, Mark stepped into the light, confessing to the brutal murder of Viola, sealing Frank's fate in a web of deceit and tragedy. Another 28 years added to his prison sentence, yet he remained tight-lipped about the motives behind his heinous actions, showing not a shred of remorse. Meanwhile, Frank emerged from the shadows of wrongful imprisonment after 19 long years, only to find himself entangled in a legal battle against the authorities that led to a staggering payout of nearly $10 million in 2014. But fate dealt him a cruel hand. Just 3 years later, he succumbed to a heart attack at the age of 54. As for Mark, he languishes in his cell, serving out his sentence, with the faint glimmer of parole on the horizon, though the odds of his release remain uncertain. It's chilling to consider that if the investigators in Viola Mamble's case had not fixated on another, the outcome might have been drastically different. In a chilling twist of fate, the suspect was manipulated into confessing to a crime he never committed. Mark, a man whose past was marred by incarceration, might have avoided the tragic path that led to Kay's demise. But as fate would have it, the story took a dark turn. Now, dear viewers, I invite you to share your thoughts on this haunting tale in the comments below. And remember, if you found this story gripping, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows.